Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to discuss the best way to shoot a music video with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. And since AI is taking over all of our jobs, you need to listen. Let's get started. All right.
Damn, he thought he was cooking. Till a real chef, pulled up in the kitchen.
This camera, I've labeled this camera the best efficient camera that you can own. I have a whole video breakdown on why I believe that to be the case. And if you want to check it out, it's on my channel. This camera allows you to be efficient with your videos, whether it's music videos, short films, whatever it is. This camera is very versatile. Today, I want to talk about how to properly shoot music videos with it in the best way possible. That way you can maximize the benefits of this camera. This video is going to be somewhat of a mini tutorial. I'm not going to go in depth about how to expose and all of those things. This video is for people who already know the basics of filmmaking and they just want to know how to use this camera to its fullest. First thing, the settings. So as far as exposure goes, there are only two main settings that you have to worry about, which are the ISO and the shutter speed. ISO, I don't recommend anything above 400. Once you get to 800, the footage is noisy and it is a small sensor, so you're not gonna get the best low light performance out of this camera. So I'll say stay at 400 or less. And if you need to go higher, then you should be adding light and not increasing your ISO. Second thing, your shutter speed. Follow the 180-degree shutter rule. If you don't know what that is, look it up. There are plenty of videos that explain it. So if you're filming in 24 frames per second, then your shutter speed should be 1/48. In this camera, I believe it goes to like 1/50, so go to that. And if you're shooting in 60 frames per second, then it's gonna be 1/120, and that's gonna be your 180-degree shutter rule. Now, if you're shooting music videos, I recommend that you just stick to the 60 frames per second, because if you don't know which clips that you're gonna be slowing down in post, then it's just best to shoot everything in 60 frames per second. That way you have the flexibility when you're editing to slow down whichever clips that you need to in that moment. But if you do know which clips are going to be slow-mo, the epic ones, which ones are going to be regular speed, maybe the performance style of the artist, then you can jump back and forth between 60 frames or 24 frames per second. If you do change the frame rate, make sure you change your shutter speed, because if you have a too low of a shutter speed for a high frame rate, then it is gonna look wonky. So make sure you match your shutter speed with the frame rate following the 180-degree shutter rule. Now with the shutter speed, if you don't want to use an ND filter, again, if you don't know what those things are, look them up. But the ND filter is pretty much sunglasses for your lens, because it allows you to control the exposure further especially when you're using a low shutter speed, because you're trying to match that 180-degree rule. So this camera does have ND filters for it, but they're small and you have to mess with like tiny little knobs that you have to turn. If you don't want to use those and you rather be like quick, you can crank up your shutter speed to compensate for the exposure. If you have a high shutter speed, you don't get a lot of motion blur. Motion blur is this thing. See me moving my hand? That little blur that you see when I'm moving, when an object is moving, that's motion blur. So people say that the movement gets to be a little bit jarring. I personally don't pay too much attention to that. I do use ND filters. It's been a couple of months since I started using those, but before, I just didn't have the time for it. I just crank up my shutter speed to properly expose, and I was fine. So I do recommend that you do use ND filters, because that will allow you to have better control of your image and you will have that cinematic look. Tip number 2, do not shoot on auto, because you're gonna let the camera control things for you, and you need to maintain as much control as possible to get the best images possible. So that means no auto ISO unless you're in specific environments that maybe the lighting is going to shift, maybe you're walking from inside to outside, then you can go into the settings and set the auto ISO range to what you want it to be. Of course, if you're vlogging, definitely go for it, shoot in auto. But if you're going to be shooting music videos and you have at least a little bit of control of your environment, do not shoot on auto, do it on manual, and dial in your settings. Of course, don't shoot in auto ISO, but you should use the auto white balance, because every camera nowadays has great auto white balance. So use the auto white balance, because it will allow you to move quicker on set when you're shooting. Another setting to keep in mind, D-Log-M should be the color profile that you use because that's gonna give you the most flexibility in post. If you don't know what D-Log-M is, look it up, but pretty much it's a flat color profile that allows you to manipulate your footage in post. So I recommend that you use D-Log-M because it will allow you to have the most pleasing image as possible. You get to manipulate and change colors and have the look that you want for your music videos. Continuing with the settings. In this camera, there's a setting for your sharpness and noise reduction. So for the sharpness, bring it all the way down to -2 because you don't want the camera to over sharpen your image and make it look like an action camera. I like the image to look soft, and then if I need to add sharpness in post, I can do that. I want to be in control because I'm a control freak. I'm kidding. And the noise reduction, I leave it at 0, but you can also put it at -2 if you plan on doing some denoising in post. You can just remove the denoising from the camera completely, but I leave it at 0 because to me, it doesn't bother me because the denoising of this camera is not that bad. You can crank it up to +2. Don't do that. I just keep it at 0. It looks good to me. Next is gonna be your gimbal mode. So remember what I said, this camera is a camera and a gimbal all in one, so you don't have to worry about carrying extra equipment. So the follow mode, the camera follows wherever you are pointing it. If you're putting it down, if you're putting it up, it follows that. Next is tilt lock. Tilt lock, keep your horizon leveled so you can tilt up and down, left and right. It will still look straight. You can turn it, it will not tilt up or down. It's not gonna tilt left and right. So usually, if you want a cinematic look, if you're having cinematic movements, any dolly in or dolly out, any pannings, any kind of like movement that you want to be stable, then tilt lock is your best bet, depending on what you're shooting, depending on the look that you're going for. Most of the time, I'm in tilt lock because that's the most cinematic. It looks professional because you're not moving all over the place. Now, there are times that you would want to use the next one, which is FPV. FPV allows the camera to follow wherever you're pointing it. So if you point it down, it will do it, and it does it really quick. So FPV, if you're shooting high energy music videos, maybe a rap song, or maybe electronic, or whatever it is that requires like lots of movements and it doesn't have to be clinical, then you use the FPV. So if you need to be all in your artist's face doing all kinds of crazy movements like these videographers be doing nowadays, then FPV is really good. It allows you to be more creative and kind of like try out different cool looking shots. So those are your gimbal modes. There's another FPV mode that keeps the camera pointing wherever the screen is. Honestly, I don't know what the difference between this and the FPV mode is. Maybe it's the speed. I'm not sure. Those are your 3 main modes that you will be using. Now, the next thing you want to work on is the speed of which it follows and do all of those crazy things. You have slow, where it takes a little bit of time. You have the default mode, which is like in between. It follows it pretty much as you're moving. And in fast mode, it just follows you exactly. I like to keep it in fast, depending on if I'm having fast movements. Duh, that's what it says. And the normal mode, if I'm like slowly panning or I'm doing slow movements, then I like to do the default mode. That way things are a lot smoother and I don't need to introduce a lot of like quick movements. Next, we're going to talk about how to properly operate this. So when you're moving with the camera, make sure your movements are smooth and continuous and not just like jumping all over the place. So if you're gonna do a dolly in, so you place the heel of your foot and you roll to your tippy toes and you walk like that. You move forward slowly, surely, back and forth. And then if you need to pan, you do the same thing. That way your movements look intentional and smooth. And if you're doing like high energy movements, then that's when you have the liberty to move as freely as you want. You know, like you just go. But you still keep it smooth because you don't want it to look like you're second guessing like what the freak you're doing. So if you want to move in the artist's face, don't just, what am I doing next? So make sure it's smooth and continuous. You should practice your movements for the videos, depending on what the shoot calls for. If it's smooth movements, then go over those movements, but make sure that they're continuous and they don't just stop because you're on a gimbal. Any movements up and down is gonna show up. So make sure that you are intentional with your movements and you are smooth and you don't look like an amateur. What this camera cannot do is automatically make your footage looks cinematic because it does not have a shallow depth of field, which is that blurry background that you usually get with a bigger camera. Because it has a bigger sensor, then you get to have more of a shallow depth of field, or also depending on your lens. This one is a smaller sensor, it's a 1-inch sensor, and the lens is a wide lens, so you don't get to have that blurred background like that. So some tricks to counteract that is you shoot mostly mediums. If you do mediums, although this is a 1-inch sensor, it's big enough where it will give you a nice blur to the background. Not a lot, but enough to look cool. I find that wide shots, everything is in focus, so things don't look as cinematic. If you're doing wide shots, so make sure that your composition look epic as hell. That's with colors, that's with lighting and things like that. But if you want like that cool blurred background, then you should do mediums. Close-ups are cool too, but depending on your subject, when you get close to their face, you will see some distortion because this is a wide angle lens. So this camera was mostly targeted towards people who vlog. So people usually have the camera at arm's length. So it needs to get as much in the frame as possible. So that's why it has a wide angle lens on there. So if you're shooting someone and you're putting it close to their face, it will get distorted. So keep that in mind. I like to do medium shots. I do wide too, but you have to have a good location, a good background, nice lighting, you know, make it look artistic and not just like a flat image that's just like, oh, well, I'm just doing this shot just because. So be intentional is the key word for this camera. There's another cool setting on here. The 180-degree roll that this camera has is pretty cool. So you go in there, you set it, you touch it, and then boop, it sets your camera up, and just press the joystick or on the screen, you tap it, and it will start spinning to 180, and then you touch it again so it could go back. Those shots are pretty cool. I find that artists really love them. So you just do those to kind of like add some coolness to your to your shots. And bonus tip, if you want to add more interesting stuff to it, you can move as you're doing it. You can pan, you can dolly in, you can dolly out. You can add a little pizzazz to make your shots stand out. This camera has a lot to offer. You can take it anywhere with you. You can shoot in places that wouldn't normally allow you to shoot. You can keep it on you, and if you have any ideas for any B-rolls or things like that, you can shoot with this camera. And because the quality is so good, you can cut it in with other cameras that you might have, or just start charging people to do music videos. And that's how you compete with AI. Remember, although I've only been speaking about this camera, you have to keep in mind that your videos is more than just the camera. It's about your lighting, your composition, and your movements, and the story that you're telling. So if all of those things are good, this camera can only help you achieve what you're trying to achieve as far as the videos go. So I do recommend it. There are some accessories for it that will help your shooting experience better, but this is not the video for it. If you want to learn more about that, leave a comment or watch my other videos. Until then, I am out. Shout out to the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, and I can't wait for the DJI Osmo Pocket 4. Deuces.